I want to introduce Craig, but I also want to say a few things which I said last week at the Distinguished Teachers Dinner, which none of you were present at. Only Brian was there. And this is especially for Michael. So, the idea was sparked by a piece I read in one of the blogs, and it says, we live in an age in which ideas, important ideas, are worn like articles of fashion. I want to repeat that for you. We live in an age in which ideas, important ideas, are worn like articles of fashion. And I'll leave that with you to ponder. So these are the words of Tom Wolfe, who expressed on the occasion of his opening address at Boston University in 1931. Beware the rise of the pseudo-intellectual, he said. Beware the rise of the pseudo-intellectual. Should we be concerned about the rise of the pseudo-intellectual? I want to stay with that point for a bit. Since the advent of education as an institution of civilization, teachers have been elevated to the status of moral icons with a predisposition to change lives and entrusted with the responsibility to impart socially relevant knowledge and to unlock the creative potential of students. This missionary-inspired conception of teaching required teachers to shape themselves and be shaped for the task of teaching. And I'm referring here in the context of university teachers and teaching. How that task was to be achieved was really defined. In the absence of appropriate teacher development and mentorship programs, Dan Lottie suggests that university teachers acquire seemingly indelible imprints from their own experiences as students. They rely on memories of their own instruction gained through what Dan Lottie calls the apprenticeship of observation. And Dan Lottie argues that then apprenticeship of observation becomes the de facto professional templates on which practice is based. Lottie goes on to argue that in the absence of disruption, novice teachers and sometimes experienced ones revert to the default mode of teaching. In other words, unless academics are exposed to alternative pedagogies that interrupt their ritualized practices, they continue to teach in the same way they were taught by their undergraduate teachers. Teaching by nature is an egocentric profession. Hence, as teaching behaviors remain largely unanalyzed, they remain what Dan calls folkways of intuitive and imitative, ready-made recipes for action and interpretation that do not require testing or analysis while promising familiar, safe, or as Craig suggests, there is something comforting about the familiar, and that is why we hang on to vestiges of the past. We were talking about hankering over the past a minute ago. So, to interrupt or disrupt this practice of ritualizing our teaching, some universities have introduced professional development programs which are potentially liberating, but these are simultaneously limiting because of the just enough pedagogy that underpins the design of these programs, which is not sufficient to liberate academics from what Robert Stenberg calls murky environments, which typify the academy. Stenberg describes a murky environment as one that is unclear, obscure, confused, or otherwise obfuscated. He notes that murky environments pose serious threats and challenges because academics feel like they should understand a particular environment or believe that they do understand a particular environment. But they don't, because they're accustomed to taking refuge in the familiar. Today, Craig will use affordance-based theoretical lens to explore how digital environments are challenging our existing paradigms, pedagogies, and I get that one right? I won't try. So Andy Hargreaves reminds us that teaching for the knowledge society prepares students and societies for economic prosperity, whereas teaching beyond the knowledge society cultivates a caring citizenry, develops character, and builds cosmopolitan identity. We cannot afford a future in which university academics have prepared students for neither the knowledge economy nor for the social and moral challenges that lie beyond it. When universities fail, society pins both its blame and its hope for change on teachers. When teachers fail, civilization faces the prospect of being plunged into irretrievably murky environments populated by pseudo-academics. It's therefore most gratifying that Craig's pedagogic approach begins with an acknowledgement of the existential realities of his students, moving to a cautious adoption of relevant technologies, mindful of the limiting potential of fashionable technologies, where creation replaces consumption, correcting replaces correct, conversation replaces content, and chaos replaces control. May I welcome Dr. Craig Blewett to inspire us with his wisdom.
Right, well, thank you, Robbie, for the intro. It's good to be here. You may not know, I'm actually on sabbatical at the moment, touring around the world, exploring Southern Africa, which is an unbelievable experience. So for the past 5 months, I've been all over the place, down to the Western Cape, down the Wild Coast. So it's been fantastic. At the moment, I'm on holiday up in Umhlanga, so home from home, and then we're about to head off into the wilds yet again. But what's been one of the most exciting parts of traveling is, and being on sabbaticals, the space it gives you to do lots of things that you can't normally do. So when you're busy, obviously, with your lectures, etc., you don't have time to sit and think. And not only think, but the opportunity to go and to share what you have learned. So that's been wonderful, traveling around to other universities. And obviously, I wanted to spend some time with my own university here. So it's wonderful to be here. Feels like I'm on holiday and I'm at work, which is fantastic. What we're going to look at is this topic, skeuomorphism, the biggest hurdle to e-learning. It's a big word, but it's not really that complex, and we'll have a look at that in a moment. This is a little bit of my background. Spent quite a lot of time working in virtual worlds and trying to understand how students learn online. We actually created Howard College campus. This was a replica of it inside Second Life, created by the students. They created libraries and lecture theatres and all sorts of things. That's one of the students in there. And we created this digital representation of the Howard College campus in all its 3D glory. And that was just one of many attempts to try and understand how learning was going to happen in the online world. And so literally probably for the last 15 years, we've explored everything from Second Life to things that are common to a lot of you like Moodle to many other environments, trying to understand how do we use this effectively if technology is having such a huge impact on our world. But I think we need to start with the big question. And the big question is, do you trust technology? Right, so that's maybe the first big question. Do you trust technology? Now, I suppose we could, well, let's have a show of hands. Put up your hand if you say yes, you trust technology. 1, only 2, 3 hands. Technology in general. 3, okay, you don't trust it? And the rest undecided. Okay, the bottom line is you actually have to trust technology. Otherwise, you're never going to drive in a car, go in an aeroplane. So if you don't trust it, I don't know how you're getting home. However, having said that, It's also something that we don't want to always inherently trust, because you end up with all sorts of things. Keyboard not found, press F1 to continue. You end up in these situations that just don't make sense to us. And I've had this over and over. I actually did this similar presentation recently for a group, an NGO called TSSA, Thinking School South Africa. They were doing a roadshow around South Africa, and I was speaking and presenting this, and the first stop was here at Durban Girls College to a whole lot of teachers that had arrived, and I'm doing a session on using technology for teaching, and there's load shedding. So now I've got 30 teachers and my laptop, and that's what it's about. And really it is. It's just about adapting. It's about saying, so now what? Let's have a conversation. So a lot of it is not about trusting technology totally, but also we can't throw it out. And I'm hoping that's sort of the balance we're going to get. Right, but you've all got tech. I've already seen people going to pick up your iPads and your iPhones and whatever. And I'm not the sort of lecturer in my lectures at the university where I tell the kids to turn off their cell phones and stuff, because that's just crazy. They're not going to. And that's fine. I'd rather them be on Twitter and share with their friends what they're learning, if by any chance they're doing that. But take out your camera. You can take the photos. You can do all sorts of things. It's all going to be there. But I will make your life easy if you go to, I've got a website up there, that one there, teacherknowledge.com/help. The slides are there, and they'll probably be on the university system somewhere as well. So you can download them there, so you don't necessarily have to remember everything or take all the photos. But I'm going to try something slightly different that I haven't tried. I'm going to give you something here. So you're going to get a little piece of paper, and I'll explain what it is. On the back, a lot of the key links that I'm going to be looking at are here. Thank you. Right, so just make sure you get one. So the one side, it's got this sort of funny little black mark, and on the other side, it's got some of the key links. Now, you all come here to find out about technology, so I presume you've all got a QR code reader on your smartphone. If you don't, download it now. So you don't even have to type in the address. You could just point your QR reader at any of those, and you can get to any of those links. So a lot of the links and things, if you want extra information, are there. Just point your QR code reader at those, and you can find out more. Right. But what I'm actually interested in is this thing on the front that we're going to use in a moment. So make sure you've all got one of these, and I will tell you how we're going to use it. It's an interesting piece of high-tech technology. Right, so we're going to start with a question. And it's obviously the ultimate question that needs to be answered. And I like to, whenever I speak to any audience, make sure that the level of intelligence of the audience is high. Now, being at a university, I'm assuming this is going to be the case. So a multiple choice question is going to come up, and it's going to pop up onto the screen, and I'm going to capture your answers. I'll show you how in a moment. But what I need you to do is I need to explain to you what I've just given you there. And it should be quite simple. Right, so let me get my little app right. Okay. Right, so this little thing is a piece of technology from a website called Plickers. You'll actually see the second link on the back here says Plickers, so you can go there and use it yourself if you like in your classroom. Essentially, what it is it's every block that everyone has is unique. Okay, there are 40, so hopefully there was enough for everyone to get one in here. And you will see it's got an A, B, C, D. Okay, so when I give you the question, if you decide the answer is A, you just hold it with whatever is your A side facing up. Got it? So if whatever answer you think it is, if you think the answer is D, you hold it with the D facing upwards, and you're going to show it towards me. Got it? Okay? The only thing I ask you to do is when you show it to me is keep your hands away from, don't cover it like that. Okay, so when you hold it, just keep your hands away from the black. Got it? Okay, so here comes the first and very important question, and hopefully you have thought long and hard about this. So here's the question. What is the meaning of life, the universe, and everything? If you think the answer is lorem ipsum, that's A, B, knowledge, C, 42, or D, smiley, happy face. Right, hold up your answers. Okay, thank you. Right, we've got one at the back there. Thank you. Yes. Yes, yes. Got. Yes. Fantastic. Got done. Okay. Yes. Okay. Right. If my internet was working on my laptop, I could throw it up there for you. But obviously it's not, so that's fine. Right. So we have a spread of results. We have got 2 people out of the 19 that I managed to capture, with these 19 here, I might have missed 1 or 2, saying A, 5 saying B, 6 saying C, and 6 saying D. Very interesting. Okay. What is the actual correct answer? The actual correct answer is C. Okay. Why is C the actual correct answer? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. If you haven't read it, you need to go out and read it. Look at the clue. There is the great computer, and they ask it the question, and after a million, bazillion years, it comes back and says the answer is 42. And they go, huh? What? He says, well, maybe you asked the wrong question. So then they have to ask the right question and come back in another 150 million years, but we're still waiting. Right, so 42. So that was just a warm-up just to get your brains working and to show you how little Plickers cards work. Okay, and as I said, this is Plickers. It's a great, easy way to capture results. In fact, each of those is coded individually. If this was my class, I could have associated your name with each of those, and I would know who answered what. And it stores it all, and it's all stored online straight away. But why I quite like it, this is a very low-tech solution. None of you need technology for this to actually work. In fact, I don't even need the internet. It just scans it straight into my phone. Once I've got a connection, it'll upload. Right, so moving on. A world of change. Well, here's another question. Do you think we live in a world of change? Do you think we live in a world of change? You've got 2 answers. Yes, no, or I'm not sure. Okay, let's see what we get here. Okay. Yep, right, got it. Okay, is it a world of change? And, right, we have the results officially in and tallied, and we have 16 people saying yes, 1 saying no, and 1 huh? What? I don't know. You've always got the doubter. Right. Right. So looking at that, you're going to say, wow. Notice that none of these services existed before 2004. 10 years ago, we did not have all these Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. In 10 years, it's literally taken over our lives. So we'd answer, wow, we do live in a world of change. That's massive in 10 years. For a site that didn't exist, that now has billions of users, basically, is just unbelievable. And so in the social media front, you're going to say, yes, we do live in a huge world of change. But is it really big change? I want to look at a couple of images of offices and classrooms or lecture theatres. Here's a school and an office. No one was around. Was anyone around in the 1800s? Michael, you weren't there, right? No one. No. Just before. Okay, just checking. So that's why I've got photos, because I didn't think most of you would be there. Okay, 1910s, still, I don't think anyone was around in those eras. Office and school. We've got our little kids in their school coming to the 1920s. I'm sure some of you are around there, no? Robbie? Not? Almost. Okay, 1930s, school and office. The 40s, to the war years. 50s. 60s. Now, some of you see it's color at last. My kids always wanted to know why I lived in a world when there was no color. I said, no, it's just suddenly one day everything just became colorful. The old days, there was no color. That was the 70s. Coming to the 80s. Okay, I'm assuming people were at school in the 80s, eh? Some of you at least. Right. To the 90s. And today. Right, what do you notice? Schools and essentially universities changed very little. You can do the same thing with universities, lecture theatres. They look much the same as they did in the 1800s. The office environment has changed dramatically. And it's obvious. You go in an office, it has changed dramatically. The use of technology in office environments is huge. It's only recently, in the last sort of few years, that universities and schools are starting to say, we need to use technology. So, generally speaking, we have very little technological or technology use at universities. So, we're in a LAN here, that's fine. You come here to do a special thing, you leave here, you go to the lecture theatre. What is technology? Technology is using PowerPoint. Okay, as we'll look at, that's not technology. So, by all intents and purposes, what's happening in our lecture theatres, in our teaching spaces, is no technology. So we have this illusion of change. We have what appears to be change, because change is swirling all around us. We're all sitting with our iPhones, and we're all sitting maybe with our laptops and things around us, and so we think there's change, but actually when it comes to teaching, it's more of an illusion of change. So I thought I'd show you an illusion just to make the point. Okay, so I've got some cards up there. All I need you to do is don't tell anyone, nor me especially, but I'm going to control your minds here. I want you to pick one card. And you've got to remember it, otherwise it doesn't work. Okay, you've got a card? Everyone chosen a card? Right, here we go. Now look closely at the thing, because I need this to work your brain. But don't forget your card. Look at that. Right, your card is gone. There we go. Is your card gone? Yes, okay, there we go. That's mind control. That I can make you all choose the same card and then make that card vanish. All right, isn't that incredible? Robbie, you can pay me extra for that incredible magic trick that I've done. Like, it's better than David Copperfield. I did this at a school once, and I see all the kids all in crazy, until they started chatting about it, and she figured it out. But anyway, it's an illusion. You see, the world is full of illusions, and maybe one of the biggest ones is not the little card trick, but is this concept that we're using technology. Because typically we would argue, say, no, yeah, I see your little photos there, but we are using technology in our classrooms or in our lectures. We have smart boards. That's high tech. We're using technology. In fact, maybe we're using iPads. Maybe we've got the students and they have iPads and they use them, and they're using them for watching videos and stuff. We are using technology. However, over and over again, what we're seeing is this sort of thing in the media. There was a huge iPad program that rolled out for a whole lot of schools in Los Angeles. And it came back saying, failed iPad experiments. LA cancels iPads. This huge multi-million-dollar program just collapsed. What's going wrong? We see the need for technology. We want to use it. Governments are putting money into it. Universities are investing money in it. Yet we actually started to see a lot of failures as well. So we have an illusion of using it, and we're seeing failures associated with it. Where's this invariably going to lead? It's going to lead to, besides the wasted money, it's going to lead us to despairing that technology actually cannot help us. And so that's really we want to start to try and understand what's going on. And I'd suggest there is a myth, and our change that we think we are making when it comes to technology is based on something very, very simple. And it's simply based on Control-C, Control-V. You all know what that is? Copy, paste. You see, this is where the problem lies. What we are doing is we are copying the old and pasting it into the new and thinking that thereby we are making effective use of technology to support our teaching and learning. I've done it years and years. I looked at lecture theatres, and so we said we should copy lecture theatres and paste them and create that same thing inside Second Life. And we did that. That's our lecture theatre inside Second Life. Fantastic. Yep, until the students have to use it. So what happens? The students are coming for a virtual lecture. This they're going to love, surely. So they get their little avatar, they move it with their fingers, they finally get the thing, and they position the person where it says, sit on me under one of those things, and finally they sit down. Now, they can't quite see because the chair in front of them is a bit high, so they flight their little avatar a little up, and then a slideshow appears on the screen in front of them, and they watch the slideshow. Why in the world did I do that? Why don't I just send them the link to the PowerPoint? They could have just watched it online or downloaded it. Well, because I'm using technology, and I've copied the real and pasted it in the virtual. But actually, I've done nothing. I've actually made their life harder by doing that. Or, as we said, we take a blackboard and we say, look, paste, and look at this miracle that we've got, the smartboard. Wow, you can write on it as well. That's incredible. Maybe you can even print it. And again, I'm not saying these things are necessarily wrong, but they are not thinking with technology. They're simply taking what we always had and replicating it. This is my favorite. Take a book and then give them an e-book. Wow, how many schools have I been to this? We use e-books. Like, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, what they can like now turn the pages digitally. Yeah, fantastic. That must be just so rich for their learning experience as compared to actually turning a physical page. You see, there's no difference. It's the same thing. Obviously, you save trees, that's good, and it's not as heavy to carry 50 textbooks when you can carry it on one iPad. I'm not saying it's wrong. But let's not fool ourselves that the fact that we're using it on an iPad suddenly makes this the use of technology for learning. Or we used to have notice boards online. Why have them online when I can put them on Moodle? Now I'm using technology for teaching. I remember when I was a student, we had to go and read those notices, but now you put it on Moodle. It's so advanced. We've advanced from PowerPoint. We used to have PowerPoint, but now we upload the slides, and they can download them. That's using technology, and that's probably one of the most common uses of Moodle on campus. If you enforce people to use Moodle, that's fine. They upload their slides there, and then they're using technology for teaching. They're not. It's nothing. They could email it as just as good. In fact, they do nothing. It's just a form of dissemination. But the problem is it's an illusion, and this is where the real danger comes in. And it's what happened in the iPad program. There is the illusion that we are using technology in an effective way for teaching, whereas all we're doing is going Control-C, Control-V. It's simply a copy-paste. And so we come to this concept of skeuomorphism. It's a very interesting word that I didn't know, but I knew if you use it in a seminar title, academics come flocking because they want to find out what it means. Robbie. Oh, I don't know. I never went to that. Is that an offline thing? Is that a paper-based dictionary? Right. Essentially, this is what it means. Keeping the form of the old, even though it has no function in the new. And I came across it not so long ago, probably 3 years ago, where Apple, amongst others, Google as well as Microsoft, made a move away from skeuomorphic imagery. So skeuomorphic imagery is where something looks like it used to look like. So classically, if you're going to design a diary on an iPad or an iPhone or something, you make it look like a diary with little leather covers, etc., etc. You'll create little knobs that looks like you could turn them, but they're just digital. Okay. And recently, not long ago, Apple said, we're doing away with all of this. You have shadows. You have buttons that look like a 3D. Okay, that's skeuomorphism. And they flattened everything. So in the last iteration of iOS, they said it was called the Great Flattening. Everything was going to become flat and clean. And they weren't the only people to do it. They were saying, we're doing away with that link to the past and making things look like their offline counterpart. And so skeuomorphism is that. So those are classic examples. Here, my diary looks like it's got a little tag there. It looks like a diary. Here, I don't know if you can see it, but when I turn my pages, they curl. You've done that on your iPhone and your smartphone. You can turn the pages. They curl. It's beautiful. It's like, oh, look at that. Curling pages. Okay. Now, there's nothing wrong with it. The reason we have skeuomorphic images and skeuomorphic representation is it helps us transition. The first time you come into technology and using an ebook, maybe you want to feel that it feels like a real book. So when you flick the pages, they turn. When you take a photo with your camera, what does it do? It makes a sound. It doesn't need to do that for the phone. The camera on the phone doesn't require that sound. That's just for you to feel like you're using an old DSLR camera or whatever and going, oh, isn't that cool how it makes that noise? You could change the noise to be anything. It could be a seagull squawking. It will still work. But the sound is there so that we have the connection with the past. That is skeuomorphism. And if you, Robbie, want to find out more, it's in Wikipedia. Okay, and under skeuomorphin, you can just read more about there, the links on your page. Right, so it's the form of the old that's brought across to the new. But the problem is, while it might make us comfortable, doing that taking the form of the old across to the new without its function can actually restrict what we do in the new. And this is where the problem comes. You see, we think, well, it's comfortable to take what we used to do and digitally use it. I have books, I'll just make them e-books. The problem is it can restrict what we can do. It restricts our thinking. It restricts our pedagogy. It restricts what we can do with technology. So let's take an example. When you're reading a book, a paper book, you only have one option how you read a paper book. You flip the pages from left to right. That's how you read them. Okay, unless it's a scroll, but we don't tend to read scrolls anymore. We flip the pages. So when you come to a book on your iPhone, it might even give you a choice. When you want to read it, do you want to swipe it left and right like that, like we would read a normal book, or do you want to flick and scroll up? When you read a web page, how do you read a web page? You scroll up. That's how web pages. You see, web pages haven't tried to copy something that was in the offline world. So you keep scrolling. But books, e-books, have tried to copy what we had in the offline world. So we tend to flip them. You say, well, that's okay. That's fine. So in my iPhone, I can actually choose if I want to flip my book or scroll my book. And I like to flip because it makes it feel like the good old book. Well, that shouldn't be a problem, should it? Well, there. I can flip my book and flip the pages. Have you seen those things? I'm sure you've come across them. They're called infographics. And they're an amazing way of producing or showing visually something. And they tend to be very long. So there's an infographic about a teacher's guide to social media, and it goes on and on and on. I can't even fit the whole thing on the screen there. But when I look at it on a web page, it makes a difference. I just scroll, and I look at that, and I go, oh, interesting, that's interesting, that's interesting, that's interesting. And I can see the whole thing. Well, what happens if I stick that onto my phone, and I want to be able to flip the pages? All of a sudden, the infographic no longer works. You see, when I took that restriction and put it into how I would read an e-book, I actually destroy the functionality that potentially could exist there. I've destroyed what I could do. See, it seems innocent just to be able to flick pages. But now all of a sudden, I cannot see an infographic. And in fact, if infographics hadn't developed, I might never have even come up with the idea that we could actually scroll and have long things that we read. So I'm not that worried about infographics. It's the point that when we take the form of the old across to the new, we can actually impact what we can do in the new environment. So we want to move from this Control-C, Control-V to a new place, Control-N, which is new documents. Okay, we don't want to copy-paste. If we're going to use technology in teaching, we want to have new things that we can do with that technology, not simply replicating. Now, it doesn't mean we can't have e-books, that we flip the pages. Doesn't mean we can't have smartboards. But if that's all we're going to do, essentially what we are doing is we are just silicon coating old pedagogies. How we used to do it, we covered in silicone and we represent it to the students. But there's so much more and so many opportunities. So but the problem is we lost. So we sit there thinking, okay, so we've got technology and we've got everything from Facebook to Twitter to cell phones to Moodle to whatever. How do we use this technology effectively in our teaching? You see, we've only come to the party lately. For a long time, business has been using technology. Education in the last few years, like, yeah, us too, choose us. We want to use it as well. And now we're saying, well, how do we do it? We need some guides. I know. We need clever people to tell us how to do it. I know. Let's go to the leaders. Apple, Microsoft, Google. Let's go to the leading technologists and find out how we should teach with technology. Say that again. Let's go to the leading technologists and find out how we should teach with technology. To me, it's like a farmer who's buying an airplane to do crop spraying. And the aircraft manufacturer then comes and says, let us explain to you how you should farm. And he goes, oh, man, you make airplanes? Oh, definitely. Please, come on. Tell me how I should farm. And he listens to them, and he gets all the advice from the aircraft manufacturer on how to farm because he wanted to buy an airplane. It makes no sense. Yet this is exactly what is happening. When we want to decide or implement technology-based teaching, we go and ask Google and Microsoft and Moodle and whoever they are, who are technology companies, how we should teach. Now, I know my background up to master's was in IT. And I spent many years analyzing systems, going to companies, and implementing technological solutions. But the company would still say to me, this is what we want. Design a technology that works for it. All of a sudden in education, we sit here saying, we don't know what we want. Give us something and tell us how to do it. And this is why things are falling apart. We're being told how to teach by people that know nothing about education. And so unless we start to think with the technology, this is going to go badly wrong. So where do we find the answers? So if we can't go to the great technological companies and ask them how we should teach, how do we know how we're going to teach effectively using technology? My favorite quote from Marshall McLuhan, the last one to discover water. I don't know who discovered water, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't a fish. Quite obviously, little fish swimming around the pond, meets his other friend fish, and one fish says to the other fish, do you know what, we're in water? He says, really? Where? No, this stuff is water. He's like, no, where? I can't see where. No, we're in water. He's like, nah, come on, stop messing around. He's going to have a drink. And goes on until the fish plops out of the water for some reason. He's going, it was water. Now I understand what water is. When you're in water, you don't know what water is. No, you might not be a fish. But we can understand this if anyone ever talks about time travel. We don't understand really what it would mean to go forward or backwards in time, because it creates all contradictions in our heads. Why? We've only ever swum inside time in one direction. None of us have ever woken up yesterday. Might have felt like it, but we haven't. And so the problem is we don't understand time. And so we are built and stuck in paradigms. We all have paradigms. And this is exactly true when it comes to technology and how we use it for learning. So those are not the guides that we want. If we want to find out a little bit more about how we should be using technology for teaching, I suggest we need to go and start to look at our market, our students, and what they're doing. I'm not saying they know, but they're doing things even subconsciously. And we need to see how are they using it for their own learning, for their own experiences, for their own sharing, for their own collaborating. What are they doing? Because Microsoft and Google and Apple and Moodle and all of these people, they do not know that. We need to go and spend some time with our students. And so that's what I did for my research, for my PhD. I stood on the edge of Facebook. And why did I choose Facebook? Well, there were like 1.5 billion people or whatever it is using it. I thought, well, that's a big enough sample of people doing something. Something's happening here. Even if you don't like it, that makes no difference. They're in this place and they're swimming around. We need to go and see what they're doing. And I leapt in and swam with them for a semester, trying to discover what is it that they are doing there. Set up a learning environment and created all sorts of issues, because I set up an environment, I set up a page, not a group, and I made them all administrators, which meant that any single one of them could delete the page, any single one of them could post as the page. They were anonymous unless they changed it. Created all sorts of fun issues. It was wonderful. It created power struggles. It created problems that we didn't know how to get around regarding uncertainty and being vulnerable. And so all of these things happened, but we swam. And resulting out of this is what I want to now share for the next little part, is try to move beyond a copy-paste and trying to identify a new set of paradigms that might inform our teaching. Now, in order to do this, I needed a lens. As any research needs some sort of theoretical lens that I could use to see what my students were doing. And I chose what is called affordance theory. There are essentially two approaches that I could have taken. The one, which is commonly taken when doing research on learning, is what's called design theory. So I look at the environment and say, well, how is this environment designed? What are its features? Because if I look at the features, I can see how they're being used or not used, etc. That's okay. But you see, when our students use Facebook for learning, they do not use it like it was designed. Actually, I don't care how it was designed. I'm interested in what they used it for. What did the environment afford them to do? That's what affordances are. What does it afford you to do? Now, the best way to illustrate this, how many of you have seen the famous Gods Must Be Crazy? Right. Okay, well, you're going to see a snippet. Discover a Pokemon.
At first, he tried to figure out pure thoughts. It had the right shape and just the right way. It was also really sweet, an ideal pure safety. And Carlo discovered he could make use of it. And every day they discovered a new use for the thing.
Right. So, this was the Coke bottle that dropped from the sky and the gods must be crazy. Now, if you look at a Coke bottle from a design perspective, it's designed in a special way. It's actually, there's a lot that's gone into it. It's very solid, and it's designed in a way that it's narrow here, so it's easy to hold. The top of the bottle is rounded, so it's nice for drinking. If I analyze a Coke bottle, in terms of its design, I can come up with all sorts of interesting things. But they didn't use it for any of that. They're rolling snakeskin, making music, creating stamps, mashing pop. Those are the affordances of the Coke bottle, whether they were intended or not. You see, and this is where it becomes interesting. So when I look at a digital environment and I look at the affordances of how students use them, we start to get an insight into how they learn in these spaces, whether it was designed for that or not. You see, when we take the design perspective, whether we are Facebook or whether we are Moodle or whether we are Apple, whoever we are, we design a set of features that we intend people to use in one way. But the world doesn't work like that. And when it comes to learning, we find things deviate quite dramatically from that. This is how education was viewed many, many years ago, 100 years ago. In fact, this appeared in a magazine called Future School, France, 1901. It's a picture of what learning will look like in the year 2000 that we've just passed. So it's a projection 100 years into the future of what learning will look like now, today. Okay, now we laugh now because it's 100 years. They've got no technology, but they're thinking technology is coming and this is what's going to happen. So you're going to have the master, the teacher up here, that's us, and he's got all these books and he puts them into this grinder and he's got some poor kid doing all the hard work here and he grinds and then the knowledge goes summarized up there, bleep, 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 into all those heads. And the kids walk away and go, oh, man, I've got the calculus figured. Fantastic. What a vision. What a dream. Man, it hasn't happened like that. And absolutely wonderful that it hasn't. You see, because this vision of learning and knowledge is based on a certain paradigm. It's based on learning being the transference of content. If I can take content from a book and put it into your head, you've learned. That doesn't work anymore. Because these kids, if they took those books and stuck them into their head and walked around our world right now, would not survive. That content is useless. Because in the modern world, we need to learn in a different way. We need to learn to be able to critique, to think, to analyze, to discern, to debate, to discuss, to know what's correct and what's incorrect. We need to be constantly learning. And so it's no longer about the content, it's about becoming learners ourselves. And that's a different paradigm to what has basically controlled things for a long time. So we need to change our perspective. We don't want to see the horse, we want to see the frog, or vice versa. So, you see if you move your head, what happens, huh? Huh? Let's get you to move your head. Right, move, huh? All right, good. So, a little change of your head, and a horse becomes a frog, or a frog becomes a horse. It's a small change, but perspective can change paradigms dramatically. The fish jumping out of the water, a small little thing, but all of a sudden it knows what water is. We get sucked up by some aliens, and all of a sudden we understand, oh, I know what time is now. Too late. Okay, that's a small change. Right, that's our students' perspective of life. Maslow's famous hierarchy of needs redone and fixed because he missed the biggest part, the internet at the bottom. I know it, as part of the sabbatical I'm on, we were up in Kakakama, up in Cedarburg, which is just stunningly beautiful up there. And while we were up there, the devastating news was there was no cell signal, there were hardly humans out there. We actually at one stage thought that everyone had been taken by aliens because we drove for over an hour before we saw anyone. Anyway, we get to this place and there is a central area where there's like a pub and there's Wi-Fi, and then there's a house which is about a 3-kilometer hike through the desert. And the gap is quite far, and if you want to connect to the world, you've got to get here. And I remember my kids being at the chalet like, should we do the 3K hike? Will we get eaten by wolves in the desert? What way? But eventually it's worth it. But I also broke and drove in the 4x4 there as well because it had been 15 minutes and we hadn't had Wi-Fi, so we all left. But that's a basic need. And so we need to have our internet. But this is our perspective of education. Our perspective often is the transference of knowledge. If I can get knowledge into your head, what do our students do? Where are the slides? Can I download the slides? I'm saying, sure, you can have the slides. You can have them right now, here, tomorrow. Oh, I don't have to go to the lecture. Okay. They also think often it's just transferring knowledge, not about the discussion of what's happening, the thinking, the debate, because that knowledge is valuable just for a point or for a moment, but soon it won't be. And so Ken Robinson, I'm just going to show you like a minute clip of his famous video, Changing Perspectives, challenges our current approach or thinking around this whole thing.
I believe we have a system of education that is modelled on the interests of industrialism and in the image of it. I'll give you a couple of examples. Schools are still pretty much organised on factory lines, so ringing bells, separate facilities, specialised into separate subjects. We still educate children by batches. You know, we put them through the system by age group. Why do we do that? You know, why is there this assumption that the most important thing kids have in common is how old they are? You know, it's like the most important thing about them is their date of manufacture. You know what I mean? Well, I know kids who are much better than other kids at the same age in different disciplines, you know, or at different times of the day, or better in smaller groups than in large groups, or sometimes they want to be on their own. If you're interested in the model of learning, you don't start from this production line mentality. It's essentially about conformity, and increasingly it's about that as you look at the growth of standardized testing and standardized curricula. And it's about standardization. I believe we've got to go in the exact opposite direction. That's what I mean about changing the paradigm.
But he's basically saying a lot of our teaching in schools and universities is built on an industrial paradigm. We produce people. We stick them through like cogs in a machine. We get them out the other side, and we still do it. I teach IT, you teach economics, this one teaches philosophy, that one teaches engineering, and they're all these separate, distinct subjects. But somehow when it comes to the real world, life doesn't seem to work like that. Someone starts speaking to you in your business, and you say, oh, no, I'm just thinking engineering at the moment. Sorry, I can't use English because that's a different subject. Or I can't talk commerce because I'm just thinking engineering, or whatever it is. And so in the real world, everything comes together where we mix them. But our teaching is often based around these set paradigms. So possibly what we need to do is change from an industrial paradigm to something that is different. Now, before we look at that, reflecting on it, what are the things that have possibly had, and there can be others, the biggest impact on teaching over the last couple of thousand years? Now, I'd suggest one of them is that thing there, which is Gutenberg's printing press. And that essentially changed how we taught from a sort of Socratic to a more didactic. So originally, the old days, before any of you were around, people would sit around and have conversations. Why? Because you couldn't store content. It wasn't written anywhere. So if you wanted to learn, you sat and you talked, and you debated, and you got things wrong, and you argued, and then you got it right, and then you improved, and you had a conversation. We invented the printing press, and now you could store knowledge in paper. And we could disseminate it. And so the logic was, well, therefore, learning is to take that content and get it back in your head and back onto paper. And so we created this environment where we had much more didactic. The next big innovation, I would argue, has been, obviously, computers and specifically the internet. Because it's actually opened up the way for us to move back to a Socratic style of learning again. What's happening? Social media. What's social mean? It's about conversation. We found there is such a huge shift back to the conversation. It's impacting our world in a dramatic way, whether you're on Snapchat, whether you're on Instagram, whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on Twitter, it's social. But our learning is still sitting over here in the printing press era. Yet what's happening in the rest of our realm is everything is happening in conversation. And so that's an oversimplification, but the point is these two technologies have had a huge impact, and the second one's impact is happening rapidly. And if universities don't respond in an appropriate way, what's going to happen to them? So maybe we need to change from an industrial paradigm, one which is production and based in batches and boxes and content, to what I argue for is potentially an organic paradigm. So not knowing what organic meant, I went on to Wikipedia and found out what organic could mean. And some of it's obvious. Biology, if you look at biology, it means pertaining to or derived from living organisms. That makes sense. If you look at organic in terms of food, it's grown in an environment free from artificial agrochemicals. And if you look at it from sociology, it's voluntary engagements in complex interdependencies for mutual benefit. So you get the sense of what organic means. So what would a learning approach that is based on an organic paradigm rather than industrial be? Here's a suggestion. A learning environment that's built around people, living organisms, interacting in a space that is free from artificial, that's to their experience, restrictions, where the types of engagements are largely voluntary as opposed to teleological determined, and learning arises from complex interactions for mutual benefit. Now, that's actually not too different to what it was like many, many thousands of years ago. You see, An organic learning environment is one that adapts, moves, changes, isn't easy to control. We're not sure where it goes. And that sometimes makes us afraid because this room has got so many chairs and so many ways you do something. We're not comfortable with things that start to mutate and we're not sure how they're going to go, where the learning is going to happen. When I set up the Facebook page, even more stressful, this was for a PhD, what happened? Someone deleted the whole page. Okay, we're afraid of where these things will go. But just as an aside, would that really matter? You see, that would matter if your knowledge resided in content that was stored on the page. See, it isn't. The knowledge was not sitting on the page. The learning was happening in the conversation. There were links everywhere. Wouldn't have mattered. And so sometimes when we really look at our fears, they're maybe not that important. So based on a central paradigm, that is an organic paradigm, developed a set of principles that potentially could be useful. And based on our friend Habermas, the formation of power and the formation of knowledge compose an indissoluble unity. When it comes to learning and knowledge and power sit side by side. The moment, this is a terrible environment. I'm doing everything that we should not be doing right now. That's why I try to give you pieces of paper at least. Okay. This serves a purpose, and it's instructivist, and I'm speaking to you, etc. But there is a power dynamic. As soon as someone stands in the front, half of you are not going to ask any questions. Okay. And the other half will sleep. But it would be the same if you stood there and I sat there. If I asked you to ask the questions via Twitter or WhatsApp or something, you'll ask the questions. And so power and knowledge are always interlinked. So two aspects in terms of our principles, power and the learning aspect. One of the key principles is moving away from teacher-centric to learner-centric. If you've been lecturing for a long time, it's quite nice being in the limelight. It's not that easy to hand across to students because who knows what they will do. Flip classrooms and teaching, bringing your students up to teach. I've loved using that. Best way to shrink the class down. Right, next lesson, you guys are going to come and do the lesson. You use my slides. Okay, but changing the power. Moving from, this was very interesting, came out of my PhD, moving from an autocracy, this is autocratic, where one stands at the front, makes all the decisions. We would have thought, you know what, if we're going to go to a digital environment, the obvious way in which a digital environment would work is democratic. Well, I even have one of my ex-students who was back there in the day, who was part of that experiment. Democracy in online worlds doesn't work. Try to create multiple voting systems. Right, guys, we want to do X, Y, and Z. Please vote so we can make a decision. Out of a class of 40, 2 vote yes, 1 votes no, and the rest say nothing. Come on, guys, we really need to make a decision. 1 more vote. Okay, it doesn't work. Democracy doesn't work in online worlds. It might work in our world to an extent. It doesn't work in the online world. So what do? Well, like homeostasis. Homeostasis is things adjust. If it doesn't work, it pulls back. So what would happen? Make a change. No one says a thing. Great, we'll keep it. Another issue comes up. Make a change. No one says a thing. Great, we'll keep it. Another issue comes up. Make a change. People freak. Rah! Try and roll it back if you can. Okay, and that's how things develop. That's how wikis work. Make a change. Everyone watches. Make a change. Everyone watches. No, what did you do there? Okay, it's homeocratic. It's a different type of power system. And then we come to the learning side. Key to learning in online environments is this interplay between vulnerability and validation. You cannot learn unless you make yourself vulnerable. Now, how many of you have ever learned snow skiing? Anyone been snow skiing? Okay, we're hoping to go next week. You can join us down at Clarence. The snow's arrived. We're getting that way skiing. Great. Snow skiing is fantastic. Now, what happens is when you learn to snow ski, when you're like my age, 75, it's difficult. So you get on your skis the first time, and you're like on that slope, and it's just a slope, and it looks like you're going down the Grand Canyon or something, but it's just like, that steep. But you're on, and you shiver, and they teach you, and you've got these little kids all learning with you. And what happens is you fall, and you're like, oh, embarrassing. And then you're embarrassed. And you get up. Now, a kid who's there, he goes, meh, and he's going down a slope like this, and you're like, oh, man. And and there's snow, and crying, and all sorts of things. And 14 seconds later, they've got the skis, and they're going again. And you're like, yay. And after a week, that kid's doing black runs, which are the hardest runs, and you're still on the nursery slopes going, oh, and you think, wow, how did you do it? You're so good. Why? Because they make themselves vulnerable. They're able to learn quicker. Now, we have a lot of reasons why we don't make ourselves vulnerable. I don't want to hurt myself. Kids don't think. Okay? And I'm going to spoil my holiday. But another one is pride. When I ask you, have you got any questions, and you don't put up your hand, oh, look stupid. You know what it's like. The students don't ask a question. Okay. But only when people make themselves vulnerable can we start to engage and can we learn. And that's core in online environments. especially with anonymity, especially with the split between real time, you find that students are much more likely to engage. The last aspect is this really weird one, retrospective sense making. You see, we live in a world where everything often has to make sense first. Prospective sense. A and B leads to C, and it's all going to be logical. It's extremely confusing when there's all this mess of stuff, and the sense emerges afterwards. It's much more inductive than it is deductive. And sense is retrospective rather than prospective. It's a different way of learning. It's a different approach. And sometimes we'll see just now it involves quite a lot of chaos. So these are some suggested pedagogies that we could now look to adopt that are not simply copy-paste, that are trying to do things by using the affordances of technology, that are trying to do things in a way that actually use technology in an effective way, not only engaging our students, but moving on powerfully. And the first is a shift from consumption to creation. Moving from a pedagogy of consumption. When you read a book on an iPad or you read a book in a printed book, those are both consumption. Another classic one. You say, you know what? We use YouTube for teaching. That's wonderful. What's the difference between watching a YouTube video or watching a lecturer stand up and speak to you? Nothing. Okay, I'm not saying you might not be able to get that lecturer there, but it's still pure consumption. There's so much more that can be done. And so, here, teaching chapter 8, nucleophilic substitution. I don't even know what that thing means. But if you're teaching this stuff, typically we give them a textbook or a slide or whatever, and you say, right, those are nucleophiles. Do anyone know those things? Good. Right, so you would read that and you would know. But now, maybe if I wanted to teach my kids about chemistry or something like that, is there a better way I could do it that actually didn't involve pure consumption, but involved creation?
I'm a chemistry jock, girl. I'm a chemistry jock. I'm a chemistry.
She's got a benzene ring. She needs to alkylate. I push those arrows, draw some bonds in my transition state. Cause I'm wondrous. When I synthesize, I use a strong base, open epoxize. Do I hate water? No, but I love to watch it leave. I quench that charge with a bomb, maybe 2 or 3. And I hear people say, man, I love your scheme. A mechanism theme.
It carries on and on and on. So now what happens there is those kids made a video about chemistry. And I've used this over and over in my lectures. I can teach you, and I've got some really boring topics. Now, one of my really favorite boring topics is I teach database in 3rd year, and we look at all sorts of just so boring things. And one of the really boring things we look at is deadlock, and what deadlock is, and deadlock avoidance. Doesn't really matter. Okay, and it's boring, and I've lectured it for 150 years. I do not want to stand up and give them this content again. They can download the slides. So I say, okay, I'll tell you what. You're going to make a video about how to illustrate deadlock. And I don't care how you do it, but it's got to be nothing to do with the textbook. So they all rush out their little iPhone cameras or whatever they do. I don't care. They can go online, use animation software. There's all sorts of things they can do. And the videos that come back are absolutely fascinating on multiple levels. I remember the one year I had students, they put a whole lot of kids into cubicles somewhere on campus in the toilets. And obviously there was a deadlock between who had the toilet paper and there wasn't toilet paper, and they were trying to pass it between the various cubicles, and it really got quite graphic. But besides being entertaining, and then at the end of it, we get all the videos together, and we put the class in the class and have some popcorn and watch the top 3. But when they create this metaphor of what they're trying to learn, I can see immediately where their weaknesses in the understanding are. Because in order for them to create the video, they have to understand the content. And by taking the content and then translating it into the story, I can see where it starts to fall apart. But they are so engaged, and they've moved from consumption to creation. And the technology is so available. Everyone has a phone, and they can create a video. There are so much Animate, Go Animate, online software. It's just endless as to what can be done. The next pedagogical change I'm suggesting when it comes to digital is to move from correct to correcting. This is a huge one, and I'm busy writing an article. I don't know how many of you read, it's just launched in South Africa, The Conversation. Okay, it's actually great for academics. Go and visit it, theconversation.com. It's actually a joint venture between academia and the media. And so if you're an academic and you want to write outside of journals so that actually someone reads it, this is a lovely spot, and they edit it with you, and it goes out. So it's really good. It's just launched in South Africa about a month ago. And I've got a new article that I'm trying to push there because I wrote one about a month ago. And one of the things that irritated me is the editor said, you can't quote Wikipedia. I went, now we've got a topic to talk about. Okay, and the topic is, we hate Wikipedia. Why? And universities say it as well. We hate it. Why? Because we believe the hallowed encyclopedias are correct. Go and do your Google search. 10 years ago, they did a comparison between Encyclopedia Britannica and Wikipedia. There were blind reviews of a whole lot of things, and Encyclopedia Britannica, I think, I may stand a correction here, had 4 errors on average per article, and 3 errors on average per article, and Wikipedia had 4. Very close. They redid it more recently, and Wikipedia had less, and now Encyclopedia Britannica is dead anyway. The point is, we think because something is published and put in a book and put on the shelves, it is correct. You see, we have been in a process of correcting. We've been in a mega wiki for years. Every time a new encyclopedia came out, between the first one and the second one, someone would correct it. Every time we write a journal paper and someone else reads it, they improve it. We're in a mega wiki. You see, we have been in a state of correcting for millennia, but we are deceived to think that unless it is correct, we can't use it. We're afraid. We don't like uncertainty. I want to give it to my students since that is right and that's what you read. Our world doesn't work like that anymore. There is so much content that is out there. If they don't learn to discern and think, they're not going to survive. And so we need to change our pedagogy. So I read this. In fact, this article, and there's a link on here. I think it's a Twitter link. Yeah, using Wikipedia. I've got a link on my Twitter post there. This guy from a university somewhere in Australia or wherever writes an article on how he uses Wikipedia with his students. So he wants to teach them, he's in sociology, he wanted to teach them about this George, whoever, Lukács, and he could give them an encyclopedia entry on it. He doesn't do that. He says, you know what? I want you to choose so-and-so. You're going to choose this guy. And you're going to go onto Wikipedia, you're going to read what's there, and then you're going to do the unthinkable. You're going to edit it. You're going to fix it up. Because as the students read it, you say, oh, he's missing something key here. I want to actually, he's getting involved. This is creation as well. But he's realizing that this entry is not perfect. And so the student starts to get involved in the process of correcting. And so correcting is a powerful pedagogy for teaching. It teaches our students something really important. Don't just accept everything that it's right. I'm sure you all have this when your students come and you're their supervisor, and the first thing is they might assume that you're the font of all knowledge. You know everything. I don't. Block your ears. We don't. We're all learning, and the quicker everyone understands it, the better it is because we get engaged in conversation. So you can read his article there. Right, the third digital pedagogy is this shift from content to conversation. You see, if I was in the old days going to teach poetry, we might have a certain poem that we're trying to share, and we'd say the blunt language used in this poem is a clear, blah, blah, blah. And they would get the text, and they would read it, and it would have an analysis of the poem, the study guide. And the study guide gives you the analysis of the poem. You go, yes. As long as I can, my daughter's just finished matric. She's been through all of this. Just find out what the examiners want, okay, and just give them that. So if the study guide has just the exact stuff, regurgitate. That's not learning. We have such opportunity. Don't just give them content. Let them have conversation around content.
You look here, you can see comments that other people's made. You highlight a line and you say comment, and you can see all the other comments people have made about it. My friend Liz actually just annotated on the same line that I did. The last line, I tell you why I must risk everything for the raw recipe of our passion. She had a similar interest in the line, how it comes together, and the meaning of the poem really comes together at the end. So that was probably my favorite line of this poem.
So they're using a piece of software that's allowing them to have a conversation around a poem. You see, because it's over the computer, all of a sudden there's less vulnerability, and they can talk about it, they can be wrong. And so all of these pedagogies into play. They're creating, they're correcting, they're having conversation, which brings us to the one which normally leads people to run screaming. And when I did this for the teachers at various parts down in Joburg and Cape Town, half of them just run screaming out the room when you use the swear word, from control to chaos. Because you're thinking, man, they've got this vision of their students in the classroom just running up the walls and swinging from the rafters, going crazy. We cannot have chaos. We need control. Now, I'm not talking about that sort of chaos. I'm talking about a chaos in our learning. I love this quote from Dole. The teacher must intentionally cause enough chaos to motivate the students to reorganize. The teacher must intentionally cause enough chaos to cause students to reorganize. You see, when things don't make sense, we have to think. When things make lots of sense, we don't have to think. I was sitting earlier today, just relaxing, sipping a cappuccino. The weather was cool. Some old fellow was singing. I won't sing. I was very relaxed. I didn't have to do a lot of thinking, although I actually wrote a blog then. But it was a very soft, easy blog I was writing. But when things don't make sense, you're doing your research, and you've got that piece of data, this piece of data, and they don't fit. It's chaotic, but your brain moves to level 2. Level 1 is just like easy conversation. Level 2, it's like running. Did any of you do the comrades? I finally can retire. I did my 10th one now, finally, on Sunday. So I'm like, yeah, I'm done. Finished. Got my little green number, put it up, feet up, done. But it's like running. You have 2 levels when you run. The one level is actually probably how you run comrades. You run, you're always comfortable. You have to be. Then you have the next level up where the dog's chasing you, and all of a sudden it's called anaerobic, or it's a big hill, poly shorts. You're like, and it's much more tiring. You can't go long like that. It's just exhausting. It's like our brain works. We've got the normal brain. What's happening now? It's me speaking, you're going, carry on. It's all quiet. Okay. Then you've got the next level where you get challenged. So I say to you, what is 47 times 12? What is it? Yeah. Now, all of a sudden, in order to answer that, your brain goes to the next level and starts going, 47 times 12. Hope he doesn't ask me. Okay, Michael's already worked it out. But the point is, we go to the next level. And that is causing enough chaos. So here's an example. We're trying to teach physics, or we're trying to teach whatever it is. And we say, there's a guy, there's a pole vaulter, and he's running at this speed, and he's going to do X, Y, and Z. What speed would he run to do blah, blah, blah? And the student then gets out the calculator and fits in the formula. There's the formula. I put speed there, I put height there, I put blah, 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 blah. And I get this answer. And then he goes to the back of the book, checks it, got it. Correct. Controlled. Perfect. That's how formulas work. Well, how about this?
That they expect simple problems. He called it an impatience with irresolution. You're impatient with things that don't resolve quickly. You expect sitcom-sized problems that wrap up in 22 minutes, 3 commercial breaks, and a laugh track. And I'll put it to all of you, what you already know, that no problem we're solving is that simple. And I'll yield the floor here for a second to Einstein, who I believe has paid his dues. He talked about the formulation of a problem being so incredibly important. And yet, in my practice, in the U.S. here, we just give problems to students. We don't involve them in the formulation of the problem. So now we have the real deal. How long will it take it to fill it up? And then even better is we take a video of someone filling it up. And it's filling up slowly, agonizingly slowly. It's tedious. Students are looking at their watches, rolling their eyes, and they're all wondering at some point or another, man, how long is it going to take to fill up? That's how you know you've baited the hook, right? So I get kids answering the question, how long will it take? I got kids who are mathematically and conversationally intimidated joining the conversation. We put names on the board, attach them to guesses, and kids have bought in here. And then we follow the process I've described. And the best part here, or one of the better parts, is that we don't get our answer from the answer key in the back of the teacher's edition. We instead just watch the end of the movie. And that's terrifying, all right? Because the theoretical models that always work out in the answer key, the back of the teacher's edition, like that's great, but it's scary to talk about sources of error when the theoretical does not match up with the practical. But those conversations have been so valuable.
Right, so what he's introducing is a whole lot of chaos. Because he's now creating a situation where they're going to work out how long this thing takes to fill up. But it's not going to match the real world. It's not going to match the formula because life doesn't work in formulas. You know, it's nice when you've got to make a decision about who you're going to marry. And you say, there's a formula. Who to marry? Do they have money? Do they look pretty? There's 3 variables and you plug them all in and you're like, fantastic, you qualify. It just doesn't work like that. What tends to happen, you've either got too much information or too little, or the formula just doesn't work. That's how life works. That's chaos. Yet we teach our kids in a very controlled environment. The formula works and it's at the back of the book. It doesn't mean that everything works like that. But a lot of our teaching does. Now, he's teaching maths. You would think, well, that's one place you wouldn't introduce chaos. He's showing them that there are so many factors that come into play. He's bringing them around conversation, around creating. All of these pedagogies are coming into play. And so there's an interesting move that's happened, I believe, over the centuries. There's a Bible quote that says, ask and it will be given you, seek and you'll find, knock and the door will be opened to you. This here is essentially what has happened with learning. You see, we had an era where everything that we knew was hidden somewhere, was hidden behind a book, was hidden behind a door. And if you want it, you knock on the book and you open it and you go, ah, it is revealed to me. Then we moved, not very long ago, to Seek, the Google era. Google came along and said, "I forget knocking. Just search." And so now you don't have to know anything. Content is ubiquitous. Why are you trying to store it? You can just search for it. Just search. And up pops the answer. It's fantastic. And so you can Google it. You just Google the answer whenever you want it. But you see, we've actually moved beyond that already. That's why things are happening so quickly. We've moved to the Ask era. We've moved to social media. This was the biggest thing I found, or one of the biggest things I found when I was doing the Facebook experiment. I thought I created this special little environment coming from the Knock generation where I would store important content for them. And I'd put special posts, and Facebook wasn't designed for this. I had to get a little add-on that we put in, and we stored this stuff buried beneath in some special forum that was all organized neatly like I thought they wanted it and should have it. And so it's excellent. They could knock and find the knowledge. And in worst case scenario, they could maybe search for it. Well, what would happen? There would be a piece of content there, and a few days later, someone would say, how do we do X, Y, and Z? I'd go, no, it's there. It's there. Ah, okay. And there would be, or someone would just answer and tell them. So I'd say, guys, don't forget, I've stored the knowledge for you over here. A day later, someone would say, how do we X, Y, and Z? They wouldn't bother to knock. They wouldn't bother to seek. They'd just ask. That's how we live. My son's like that all the time. I say, go and search Google. Nah, I just ask you. Because that's what social media does. If you don't know something, just ask. Someone knows. And so it's changing. It's changing from storage to searching content to having conversations around content. And so as quick as it's happening rapidly before our very eyes. Things are changing. And so what is the impact of trying new digital approaches? Not simply copy-pasting, trying to throw in a bit of chaos in conversation and creating and correcting. This is what you get when you do this with your students. You're going to get chaos, confusion, conflict, and complaints. Isn't that fantastic? Now you're all going to rush out there and say, fantastic, I want that in my class. Because that's what I want, because when I write the review for the university, it'll just be full of complaints and confusion. Here's an example. We run this for a lot of my courses. We have an online debate. And this was my colleague Rose and myself, and we're having a discussion with about, I don't know, it was about 30 students. I think it was postgrad students in this chat room. It's an online chat room. And so now if you've ever been in a chat room, you've got so many people talking at the same time, and you've got multiple streams of conversation. And someone's asked a question, and the answer is coming here, and there's 50 responses in between it. So Rose and I are trying to argue with them all at the same time. So our brains are just going, woo. Okay, at the same time, these students, because they're not used to it, they also just trying to answer. So this went on for about an hour. And then we got this. Looking at what we've been through in the past 45 minutes, it's more like the survival of the fittest, and I personally can't keep up, said the one. Craig and Rose, I think we need a 5-minute break. And our answer was, go and have a break. We carrying on. The conversation is not stopping afterwards. But it was hard to keep up with the current conversation, answering questions, blah, blah, blah. And so they were complaining, man, it's exhausting. It's so exhausting. Why are we doing this? Well, is it good to do that to them? Well, it's like looking for the black dot. Can you see the black dot? Yeah, no, it's right there. It's right there. It's just to the right. Just there, if you look to the right. No, it's one up from there. Okay, there. You got the black dot? Oh, yeah. It's moving because the big C is concentration. That's a lesson with no chaos, confusion, conflict, or complaints. You want to have no complaints for your students? Stand up here and lecture, give them slides, and in fact, let them download them before they come. And then they can arrive, and they go, oh, this is good. The end. Fantastic. Off to the next lecture. No chaos, no conflict, no complaints. Sleeping. You see, it's the brain thing again. Those students, when they were involved in that online discussion, their brain was at 100% for an hour. I never get that in a lecture theatre. They complain, but the amount of learning that took place was huge. And not only that, I had a transcript of the debate afterwards. And now for those that are totally burnt out, it's fine. You've got 3 questions you now need to answer. Go through the transcript and answer this. What do you think about Freddie's question and his answer, blah, 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 whatever it is you'd like to ask. And so they can do this retrospective sense-making as well. And so we have this huge ability to keep them involved. So just pulling it all together. I love these quotes. These are from the olden days before most of you were born. 1815, Principles publication. Students today depend on paper too much. They don't know how to write on a slate without getting chalk dust all over themselves. They can't clean a slate properly. What will happen when they run out of paper? Or, 1907, students today depend too much on ink. They don't know how to use a knife to sharpen a pencil. Pen and ink will never replace the pencil. Or, 1928, moving on. Students today depend on store-bought ink. Terrible. They don't know how to make their own. When they run out of ink, they'll be unable to write words or ciphers until their next trip to the settlement. This is a sad commentary on modern education that students do not know how to make ink. 1950. Ballpoint pens will be the ruin of education in our country. Students use these devices and throw them away. The American values of thrift and frugality are being discarded. Banks and businesses will never allow such expensive luxuries as ballpoint pens. So, these are things that appeared in distinguished journals over the ages, and we sit and we look at them and go, that's ridiculous. Right, let's laugh at ourselves. Students today depend too much on cell phones. Might we say that? Students today depend too much on Facebook. Facebook will never replace the classroom. Come on, get real, it's impossible. Students today don't know how to handwrite notes. This is a sad commentary on modern education. They have no idea. They use two thumbs. All they can do is text. iPads will be the ruin of education in our country. Schools and universities will never allow such expensive luxuries. You see, in 5 years' time, or 10 years, or whenever, people can be laughing at us for exactly these same things, and it's happening far quicker. Those technologies of the pen that replaced the pencil, of the ballpoint pen that replaced the dipping ink fountain pen, took years. This is happening dramatically and quickly, and things are changing. But this is what I want to leave you with, which is quite exciting. Gmail, for many, many, many years, and many of you probably use Gmail, was in beta. And there were millions of users using it. And it said Gmail beta, and it changed a couple of years back. Yet we all used it. There is something that happens, and it's what I call the beta principle. The web does not work the same as we used to work. You see, when I prepare a lecture, it's neat, and I check it, just that spelling slightly there, get the slide right, and you spend 6 months, and you deliver the perfect crafted thing. You're like, oh, correct. And if there is a little error, you're like, whew, okay. And because it's correct, you don't want to change it. You see, technology doesn't work like that. Websites are up all the time that are full of errors. We live in a generation when a new cell phone comes out, I'm getting updates on my iOS every few months. Why? Because we test it for them. We live in a generation where we are used to things correcting. And what's good about that is we don't have to get it right. We don't have to use technology and say, oh, you know what, if I don't get it right, the students are going to freak out. No, they're not. They are used to the beta mindset. They are used to things correcting. They are used to things not being perfect. You arrive one day and say, guys, today we're going to use a chat room. Oh, we've got load shedding. Right, we're going to have a chat room outside around the tree. Let's do that. We adapt. But our attempts to use it are what are important, not that it is perfect. I saw this about what happened with skeuomorphic design. Countless pixels were spilled during the great user interface flattening of 2013-2014. Flat design didn't just kill skeuomorphism, it danced on its grave and then erased every last trace of beveling, shadow, and granite texture from the headstone. So what they were saying is that skeuomorphism was just wiped out and everything had to be flat, and that was it. But when we come and look at ourselves and what's going, the one thing we can never erase is the engraver. You see, the teacher, the lecturer, is what is key in this entire process. You can have the best technology, the university can support you with the best technology, but unless we apply ourselves, unless we put ourselves into that learning, unless we come up with appropriate pedagogies, nothing's going to work. It doesn't matter how good that technology is. And so it's about the teacher. The fact that you're here shows that you're interested. As Rabi was saying at the start, too many just simply take what they've always done and will continue to do that. And so the important thing is to have teachers. And so I leave you now with a final little riddle. And I'm going to check because I want to check how many people get the right answer for this one. So, the final riddle. This is the question. There are 3 birds on a branch. One decided to fly away. How many birds are left in the branch? And your options are A0, B1, C2, or D3. And answers up. Right. Got it. Get the right answer up. I'll come back to you. Right. Got an answer? Other way, I can't do that side. Okay. Right. Got it. No answers there. Got it. Yes. Fantastic. Okay. Right. Okay. Right. The results are in. Okay. So we have 8 people. Well, by the way, the 70% got it right. 17% got it right. We have 8 people saying A, 1 saying B, 6 saying C, and 3 saying D. Right. And poor class. Come on, guys. The correct answer is, if you've got 2 birds or 3 birds on a tree and 1 decides to fly away, how many will you have left? 3. You see the fact that you've got 3 birds sitting on a tree and 1 decides to fly away, you've still got 3 sitting there and saying, I'm going to fly away. Yeah, me too. Yeah, definitely going to fly away. You? Yep, definitely fly. Yeah, for sure. I'm in. You? Yeah, definitely. I have made a decision. I will fly away. And you? Yeah, definitely. Still 3 birds on the tree. You see, that's what happens when it comes to technology. We can decide to use something, but it's not the same as actually using it. And so what's really important is it's great. We could sit in multiple and millions of seminars and read books and read web pages, and I am going to one day use this. And we'll be like the 3 little birds sitting on the tree deciding to fly away and never going anywhere. So that is, and then my computer came to a grinding halt at about there, which is actually fine. So I want to leave you with that, and thank you for your attention. And if we have any questions, now is going to be your opportunity.
Thank you. So hopefully you are not as skeuomorphized as I am. So there's much food for thought in that. But I realized I didn't introduce myself to you. I am Ravi Dampa, the Director of Teaching and Learning at UKZN. And my interest is on the potential of technology for enriching cognitive development. So like you, I'm a cynic, but also very excited about what technology can do. I'm also excited about what technology can't do. And I think we had a wonderful display of that diversity perspectives from Craig today. But before I engage a discussion with Craig, I'd love to know who you are. So if you could just very quickly tell us your name and where you're located in terms of discipline, and what is your interest in technology?
Hi, my name is Rosilla. I am a student here at College of Law doing Masters, and my interest here is technology itself.
I'm Sue Asma. I'm a teacher at Durban Hills College, and we're trying to roll out technology and use it in the classrooms, and I was interested in coming to the talk.
Same. Ditto.
I'm Mike Moore. I'm a discipline of ICT, and Craig's one of our lecturers here, and I enjoy his way of delivering.
Okay.
We are from Master College Durban North. We both lecture IT and we're both doing research on IT education.
Sorry,
Tina from ICS. Manage the user support section, and we also deal with the lecture venue support, and I'm here to see how ICS can assist in enabling technology.
I'm Henry Reynolds. I'm from Academic Computing, which is part of ICS. We support e-learning, so that's very interesting.
Okay, I'm Cindy Tulu, the events coordinator for the Teaching and Learning Office. So basically, I coordinate these events.
I'm Gabriel Daron, and I'm an intern at the UTLO office.
I'm the former intern at the UTLO office.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Sanjay. I'm from ESCO. ESCO. I've been listening to your comments about the graduate.
I'm Mohammed Khan. I'm also from Skeuomorphism, and I'm a PhD student here in engineering, and I'm also president of Skeuomorphism. So I had multiple interests in the lecture with regard how e-learning can kind of influence society.
Hi everyone, I'm James Lees. I run a startup called Advantage Learn, and we build and run e-learning systems. We also do our own educational brands through systems.
Hi, I'm Anand Nada. I'm from the discipline of physiology. This lecture drew my attention because two of my colleagues and I were involved in a project last year. We had purchased a new teaching system, and we had conducted an impact study on how the system was received by the students. And we came up with some very unusual results. So I think we are constantly probing and looking beyond.
Right. Hilary and I are on to you. Yeah. I'll say a little bit more about that.
Russell Chetty, ex-pupil of, ex-student of Craig's. I work at Academic Computing and we support e-learning.
Hello, I'm Michael Samuel. I'm from the School of Education. I've been part of the journey that Craig's been walking of what's the value of having an educational dimension to understanding the debates about technology. I'm a supreme skeptic of technology as a possibility for elaborating our thinking. And thank you.
Angela Jones, School of Education. I think I engage students a lot in the confusion, chaos, not understanding what this woman's on about. But a month later, we all are onto it. And I also use Facebook with my teaching as well, new pedagogies.
Okay, my name is Daniel from ISMT, master's student. I'm very interested in e-learning personally and educational technology, use of technology in education.
Elizabeth Adoni, I'm from nursing and I'm very much interested in e-learning as well.
Okay, a wonderful diversity of different disciplinary interests, and good to see colleagues from outside the university join us, particularly the load shedders. I mean, just while you're here, so we'll chat after tea. That's fine. So I pointed out at you this morning. Hilary and I met to talk about a project, and suddenly we conceptualized two very different projects. And this is something of an act of serendipity. I had a vague notion of what your presentation was going to be about.
Does it talk to, doesn't it?
Sorry?
It does talk to what we talked about this morning.
Please go ahead and repeat.
We're looking at build pedagogy. And are the environments suitable, the learning spaces suitable for the type of pedagogy to be envisaged? If we talk about flipped learning, for example, where people will watch a lecture beforehand and then come into a learning space and engage in dialogue with the lecturer, we line them up in tables in a way which is very, very unsuitable for dialogue. So this whole idea of converting learning spaces into spaces that are appropriate and engaging for the technology used, and not simply staying with old space habits.
So ultimately that discussion ended in a project where we can bring together architects from the School of Architecture, professionals from ISNT, professionals from the School of Education, and the fourth pillar was the students. So it's going to be a research project involving different stakeholders to answer the question, how can we re-envision learning spaces?
I think that's very important. I mean, you saw what Ken Robinson saying. This, again, it comes back to affordances. What does this space here afford? It essentially affords instructivism. I'm glad we put the computers down, because then it would have afforded you hiding as well behind the computers. But this doesn't afford really conversation. So when you start to say, well, I'm going to put technology in a space, you can drop it like this and you're going to get something. But what does it look like? And we don't even have the answers yet, because we're still trying to understand it. And schools and universities bring the technology in, but haven't actually gone through this conversation of saying, what would that space really look like if we try to bring in these pedagogies?
where they had more opportunity to have conversation or a bit of chaos or a bit of creating or a bit of whatever. What would they look like? And I think that's going to be an interesting journey and to discover.
I think we found the person to be the project leader.
Glad I'm on sabbatical.
Next year. It comes with a big pot of money. So here's the challenge. We give you 100 square meters of space. Tell us what you'll do with it. Yeah. And we give you 100,000 rand. That's a rand per meter.
Yeah, and I think, these are interesting, but I think the thing we've got to understand is, and I found this over and over in my room, we actually don't know the answers yet. So many things came out that I was like shocked with, simple one. I thought it would be a democracy online, but it didn't turn out to be. I thought they would like the content organizers, and it didn't. But this is the only way we find out, by leaping in, applying lots of brains, trying it. I guarantee whatever space we come up with won't be right, but it'll be a lot better than what we've got. And the next, and it's the big wiki. Essentially, we'll build a second space, and that'll be even better. But that's the path. Not to just say, well, let's just dump technology in the same rows, in the same lecture theatres, and hope it works. Because that's not going to happen.
So that's the challenge before you, and the project will be launched before the end of the year by Craig. And find your space in that project. So the floor is now open for discussion, comment, critique, questions.
Thank you, Craig. I want to go straight to the heart of the debate about what you understand by what is learning, because what you seem to be pushing us to elaborate is our conceptions of what is learning. And I think for me, what I'm hearing is a distinction between econometric understandings of learning and learning for deeper conceptions. Now, my question is, in your triad of the internet as the baseline of the hierarchy of needs, isn't it that we're promoting within the generation that engages with this technology comfortably, and note I'm not labeling them, and it could be any group of individuals, aren't we producing a superficiality of learning by the way in which they abuse the technology, rather than producing the depth of learning? So I'm trying to elaborate your concern to be able to think about learning as being more than just simply accessing or being able to. So I want to push you. What's your theory of learning?
Okay, so now that is important.
So is that a related question?
Yes. Whereas I've also been looking at the trend of learning and the concept of learning, particularly in my engagement with social media. I decided to go into LinkedIn and Twitter primarily for learning purposes and networking. And I've been asking myself, what learning really occurs when it's at that, it looks like a superficial level, sort of. So I want to find out, like he's saying, is there really a depth of learning when you just ask and you get? It looks like it's going briskly. You do a chat discussion of 1 hour. You need a reflection, you need something else to really get the concept of what you have done. I engage in weekly chats, Twitter chats, 1 hour. And I have to go back to check what did I really gain in this 1 hour. So just to buttress the point that I've also been thinking about the flip system, the blend system, all of those learning systems. What degree of learning actually will take place as compared to what has been occurring?
Any a related question?
In looking at the concept of learning, you have to look at how that learning is assessed. So when our assessment is currently in boxes, you might be in my box and I'm assessing you for something that you learned through my box, whatever it may be, but you learned someone else's box. So assessment has to alter in order to accommodate the new learning.
To ease you into the discussion, I think Michael's is essentially a comment at the philosophical level. I don't think it's really a question. It's probing you.
It has to be philosophical.
And I think the other two comments are about the procedural notions of your understanding of learning as it relates to assessment.
Yeah, and I think what Michael is raising there is what is learning. I spend a lot of time on PhD dealing with this because we don't actually know specifically how do we learn and what is learning. For those who are not from education, you can go from behaviorist theories of learning to cognitive theories of learning, and on to connectivist theories of learning. What is learning? So the old Pavlovian style type learning, if you ring the bell, the dog salivates, it's learned type story. But is learning a black box in our brain? I've essentially moved towards my theory of learning as a probably more sort of progressive, newer theory, which is called connectivism. And what that implies is that learning is a lot to do with the connections that are created when traversing content and knowledge pathways. So when it comes to the next question about depth, you see, we can also sometimes have the illusion that there is depth of learning just because I could, recite 100 facts or I had memorized 12 poems. Equally, we can get the illusion, and not even the illusion, the reality that there is a lack of depth when students, as you were saying, just Google a feature and pull back an answer. However, where we can have huge depth of learning and this ability to start creating connections is when you have to find, you've got to sift a moving sea of content that firstly you don't know if it's correct, you don't know who changed it, and out of that you've now got to make sense and start to create meaning making. And so to me, learning is this process of meaning making. And that, when you start to look at Maslow's sort of basic hierarchy, are those higher levels. That's where you are starting to evaluate, analyze, and I talked about creating as well. When you are creating content that you have pulled out of a shifting mass of knowledge, try to create connections and make sense, that to me is where I'm seeing learning is moving. It doesn't necessarily mean that I can take the content and simply regurgitate, but I can think about the content. And I suppose I'm passionate about thinking. Now, we're all lazy. Well, okay, one clear one. Many of us are lazy, and I know my students typically are. And so they want content regurgitation. They want to be able to say, give me the 12 points. And if you don't say the 12 points, we find this in our honours classes. Rather than say there's one textbook, there isn't. In fact, there are no prescribed texts. Here are 30 links to start with. Why don't they like that? Because the content is not defined and it starts to spread. But that's the world they're going to live in. A world that they're going to have to navigate, a plethora of content, make sense of it, pull something out of that, and make a reasoned argument out of it. And to me, that's the concept of learning, the ability to make connections, the ability to find meaning in a shifting sea of knowledge. So that's just like a very short answer to how I see learning as moving from purely behaviorist to cognitivist. Yes?
I'd just like to make a comment. Something that I found really interesting is that at school we have a lot of resistance from certain teachers about incorporating technology. But what has been quite amazing is how much resistance we've had from some of the children. Like you're saying, they want point 1 to 12. I can learn it. I'm safe. I know I've done the stuff. When we've changed the way of learning to them going out and having to make videos about certain things, they're feeling really insecure about the content. They feel they're not being taught properly. Is this actually learning? Surely we should have a textbook which says you've got from A to Z and this is what you've got to learn. And I've just been really fascinated by the fact that a lot of the children are resistant to the change of using technology. They love technology, but now tell me that this is the way I'm learning. It's very frightening for them. In addition to the fact, as Gay said, they're still being assessed on pen and paper. They're not being assessed with technology.
Yeah, I think you've got two issues there. A lot of the schools have had that exact comment, that there's 3 levels of education that need to take place. It's the teachers, it's the parents, and it's the children. And you're going to get resistance at all those levels. Now, the fact that people resist doesn't mean it's wrong, as you obviously know. They're often resisting. And I say to my own students, I say, the process of you coming to my lectures is not going to be you just sitting there snoozing, which is what they would like. But that content, that learning, has to happen. Let's call it X. X is going to happen at some stage. And either it's going to be in the 2 weeks prior to the exam where you're sitting there going, man, what is this stuff? Or we will spread it through. It'll be far easier. It'll be far more engaging. And when it gets to that exam, you'll actually already know the content. But X is going to get into your head eventually. But it's unusual to them. It's unusual to the parents, it's unusual to the teachers. But what you said and Gay was saying, often our assessment hasn't matched it. And I've got some of my master's students back there. We did something there which I really enjoyed. I don't know if you have to comment whether they enjoyed it or not. But we ran an online, I tried to move a lot of our stuff to be online because we were doing like current trends or something, so it seemed quite appropriate, despite the university's resistance of us using technology for teaching current trends. But anyway, it's another topic. So we're doing current trends online, and we had a debate, and it was quite fun. We set up a chat room, an online chat room, and there were 3 chat rooms, in fact. So Team A was in here, Team B was in here, and the middle chat room was where they met. But I could see them all, and obviously Team A could only see their one in the middle one. They would send their champion in, they would argue about something, but obviously in the background the teams could be helping them, and then they would sort of leave. Then the next 2 would come in. Now, what was interesting about that is obviously I could give input to what they were saying in the background, but the learning process didn't end there. At the end of that, I could then comment on the transcript of the debate. You know, great point, why didn't you say this, bad point, etc. But it didn't even end there, it got to assessment. And so the assessment in the exam was recreate a debate around, and it might have even been the same topic, showing the pros and cons. So rather than just saying list the 5 advantages and the 5 disadvantages, you've been through a debate, you've thought about it, you've argued about it, you've reflected on it. Now let me assess you in a very similar way. Now I would have actually done it online, but the university wouldn't let us do it online either. So we adapted, and they had to write it down or whatever they did. But I try to bring that assessment in. But again, the innovation also does eventually have to try and move into our assessment as well. But it's a matter of time, hopefully.
That's fine. I was just pointing out the fact that, especially at schools, we work backwards. So we work towards the way assessments are required. So if you're doing something here that's highly innovative and doesn't give you an assessment at the end, it stunts the growth of that, is what I'm saying. So unless you change the assessment, you're not going to change anything.
Okay, just an observation here, really, that the ability to Google helps regurgitation, but regurgitation is always possible. You could go into the stacks, you could pull out a book, and you'd be answered, epistemology is. So it's not, regurgitation and superficial learning issue is not new to the digital era. But how to facilitate deep learning is on the way you create the learning tasks. Given the task which is nebulous, where there is no specific answer, which requires investigation, requires analysis and synthesis. So that is not the tool, it's a teaching approach that you use, the tasks that you use. And that's all I wanted to say, except to say thank you for answering your question about who was born in the 1800s, because you did say you taught databases for 150 years.
Yeah.
So thanks.
You give it away eventually.
Well. Firstly, thank you. It was very, very insightful talk. Really appreciate it. Just around the digital pedagogy, 2 things that I just want to ask you about to see if you've got any thoughts on it is the role of curiosity in that. I know you mentioned chaos, and that would probably stimulate curiosity in a lot of ways, but the role of curiosity-based learning in that model, and then also the role of curation in your digital pedagogy. Because a lot of what's happening in the web nowadays, and being a developer myself, we've actually journeyed with this for many years. And you'll know this, the kind of coding and development side of things have had digital learning platforms for decades now, and there's been a lot of development there. And a lot of what's happened and how we learn now is based on curation. Because there's such a sheer mass of content that you actually want to go to a space that is slightly curated in order to find reputable sources and then move through it. So those are my 2 things, curiosity 1 and then curation. Where do you see those goods?
Okay, so 2 other good C's. Craig. Curiosity obviously is huge. Most, I would guess, of our students are inherently curious, especially when it comes to technology. You know, so the fact that you put out links, go watch this video, go and do this, go and look for this. You know, when it's online, it's so simple for them to click and start to look, and I think using it is huge. There's so many ways in which we can actually encourage curiosity, which are actually quite simple, which I'm going to come up to the curation thing. I've got something on that which is linked. But for example, not these little clicker things, but you're familiar with. We've got the QR codes. I've seen universities and actually schools do this. Rather than give simple answers, they would print out QR codes and stick them on physical objects. Get the students to go around and just scan those codes in the search for something. They're trying to find the answer to a specific problem. So I could give them 12 resources. Now I can get them to actually go and start to search for these things. They find one on a tree, they whack it, they read something. There's the clue that leads me to the next one. You've just essentially the gamification of stuff, which comes back to Ibrahim's research. But curiosity is obviously built into all of that, and I think it has a huge role to play. There's so many exciting things you can do. The other one is curation. We live in a world that's just massive. And to me, curation, and I like to encourage my students to become curators, because it's the first step. Well, it's a step before creating. It's not just simply pulling everything. Now, a great tool for curators, there's so many great tools, but a great tool of any you use on your mobile phones is Flipboard. It's an amazing tool to actually curate content. So in my Flipboard, I've got Flipboard on technology, I've got Flipboard on social media, I've got another one on low-tech technology for teaching, blah, blah, blah. But as I read stuff, I just add it to these curated magazines. But what it starts to do, as you say, it pulls together a series of content. And when you get your students to, using Flipboard, using whatever they want to use, curated content requires a level of thinking, because you can't just put any rubbish in there. And to me, that's why it's the first level of starting to get engaged in new pedagogy. Because that's not so easy to do in a manual in the physical world. I'll either go to photostat those 3 articles, put them in a LibreArch file. Now you can curate so easily. And I think it's a great way of kicking them into it. Now say, okay, now you've created a magazine in Flipboard that's got 50 articles, fantastic. Write something that is the header article to this, that what are the major themes arising in topic X, supported by all of these. So now it kicks them up to the next level of creating. Yes, but I think curiosity and curation are just great devices. Yeah.
What should we do with Moodle, or should we even have Moodle?
To me, it comes back to the same thing. All of these things, like Moodle and whatever, they're a good and a bad. So on the negative side, to me, things like Moodle are designed by technologists. Okay, people who have a certain frame. The way it works, it's built around a certain paradigm. It's not. They've tried to change it, but it's not a conversation-centric paradigm. Okay, it's a content-centric paradigm. It's fine. However, I could take Moodle and use it very effectively, or I could take Moodle and use it really badly. I could take something like Edmodo, which I find is really clever. It's very conversation-centric, blah, blah, blah. I can use it badly or well. So the point comes back to whatever the technology is, it's about us developing the right digital pedagogies. However, it is easier, I believe, if the tool does encourage you in a certain way. Maybe doesn't allow you to store. I grew up in an area where everything was stored in folders. I think, well, why doesn't this thing have folders? And I can organize my stuff in folders. It doesn't have folders. What has it got? It's got tags. I don't want to use tags, I like folders. But when you think about it, tags are much better. Because if I stick something in a folder, it can be in folder A, but now it can't be in folder B. But it can be tagged in tag A and B. Okay, so it's much more powerful. But it's not how I was brought up. I was brought up under structure, not tagging, and on it goes. So if the tool doesn't allow me to create folders, I have to change. A little uncomfortable. So I think the short answer is, I'm not a Moodle lover. But it can be used effectively for those people that do use it. That's the key. If you're just uploading your slides.
As readily as one would expect.
See, my problem is, possibly as well, is a lecturer may use it effectively. What the problem with some of these environments is the students see them as, and this is I hate this word, learning management systems.
Yes.
Okay, they're about managing learning, not about learning itself. And so the students see it as that, and so they go there to download the slides and find out what the announcements are. They're not learning at all.
No.
They're not a space, and I'm not even actually suggesting Facebook is a thing to use. But what was interesting, because Facebook plugged into the social graph of the students, at 2 a.m, they were engaging in course content. Why? Because they saw it in their feeds. They actually complained sometimes. Our friends are asking us, what's the stuff we're seeing on your timeline all the time? Great, they're always talking about it. Okay, so it wasn't a separate thing. They weren't in categories and boxes. So that's a huge advantage. So that can be a disadvantage of having this special space that is built in a certain way. Michael.
Okay, I want to link back to the debate on teaching, learning, and assessment relationships, and I'm wondering whether it would be useful for us to separate out the debate around what is assessment for and what are we doing with assessment tasks. Because I think what's often happening in the way in which we're designing our curriculum, it ought to bring teaching, learning, and assessment in dialogue with each other. But the the characteristics of what assessment in higher education or in school education is for is got very little to do with learning. It's got to deal with commodifying individuals, about certifying individuals, about getting qualifications. So I know in my own style of teaching, I would rather say, let's bother about the assessment at the end point of it all, but let's rather, during the process of engaging with the teaching and learning engagements, let's concentrate on creativity, imagination, curiosity, dialogical, all of those kinds of interactive pedagogies that you're talking about. I think if we do that, then what would happen would be that we'd free individuals to say, okay, let's enjoy ourselves doing all of these extensions, and then we'll deal with the issue about assessment. For me, the last comment I had to make, the supreme compliment I got from one of my students who was preparing for the matric exam, who came up to me and says, which texts are they actually going to be testing us on in the matric literature examination? That was the supreme compliment, because what the intention was, they weren't learning slavishly, I don't know, Julius Caesar or whatever in English literature. They were learning about literature and about languaging, etc. And so the issue was, well, you mean they're only going to test us on one Shakespeare? Yes, only one Shakespeare. That is the compliment, I think, that one needs to be enabling to design a curriculum where the tail doesn't wag the dog. And that what our entire systems of education seem to be geared towards is those econometric production outputs that we are engaging with. That's half a comment and half a provocation.
Yeah, but I think, just to put it in last comment, I think what you're saying is, sadly, and I don't know, it is the commodification of education. It's where this is all leading, which ultimately we must be able to measure it. It must be measured like this, which, as you said earlier, it just ripples back. So that's what we want. That's how you will assess it. Therefore, your teaching becomes hindered, etc., etc. I just think the other side is that we are going to require people to start coming out, and I keep saying this to my students, don't expect to come out of here and want to get a job. Come out of the system and make a job. That's what our country needs. And if we can make people who come out of the system, who are these creators and these thinkers and these innovators, well, then we're going to achieve it regardless of, what the system is trying to create. But that may take a while, but even if we get some who come out with those skills, I think it'll be huge.
A million thanks to you. And before we say goodbye to you, I just want to make two announcements. The first relates to the annual Teaching and Learning Conference, some of you might have heard about. And interestingly, for the first time this year, we've introduced a special interest group on technology in education. Okay? The person that's leading that strand is Professor Randhir Rawat from engineering, from the School of Engineering. So do look out for the conference registration alert, which is on the Teaching and Learning website. And what Ibrahim will do is develop a list using the attendance register, and the list will serve two purposes. One, to inform you of the Teaching and Learning Conference, and to invite you to register and attend. Unfortunately, you can't present. The closing date has come and gone, and in fact, we've been oversubscribed in terms of abstracts received. But we do encourage you to attend the conference and join the special interest group on technology. That email list that Ibrahim will create will also be used to send you articles, which we occasionally share with each other. And I often wonder, who are the people involved or interested in technology in this university, which is why I asked the question, who are you and what is your interest? So expect us to send you articles. Use the delete button judiciously. And if you find it an irritation, just reply to say, remove me from your list. Okay? And we look forward to further conversations with you. I think these isolated seminars need to be expanded to richer conversations. So we'll be inviting you to join research projects. If you have ideas that you'd like to share, we'll create the fora for you to do it. We'll create research projects for you too. So you have, consider us your partner in crime. In teaching. With that, let me say thank you. When Craig agreed to do this seminar and to sacrifice his sabbatical, I said, "Are you mad?" And of course, there is a bit of madness in a man so passionate about technology. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.